What if I told you that the same powder used to polish the lenses of the Hubble Space Telescope, the instrument that lets humanity stare 14 billion light years into the past, costs exactly $2, fits in a bag the size of your palm, and has been sitting on a shelf in a lapidary supply store right next to the auto parts shop, selling you a $40 restoration kit that doesn't even work as well? And what if I told you that every major automotive brand, every detailing company, every engineer who ever designed a headlight restoration product already knows this? They've always known. They just decided you shouldn't. Stop whatever you're doing right now. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a car tip. It's a window into how entire industries are engineered not to solve your problem, but to keep you paying to almost solve it over and over again until the day you finally give up and hand over $200 for a brand new headlight. That system has been running for decades, and tonight we're blowing the door off it. Let's start with something you've probably seen 100 times without really thinking about it. You're walking through a parking lot, daylight, middle of the afternoon, and you pass a car. Could be a Honda, could be a Toyota, could be a BMW, and the headlights look like someone smeared petroleum jelly over them, yellowed, milky, fogged up from the inside out. You think, man, that's ugly. Maybe you've said it about your own car. Maybe you've gotten a quote at the dealership and quietly swallowed the number. Maybe you bought one of those little restoration kits at the auto parts store and spent a Saturday afternoon sanding and buffing, only to have those headlights start clouding right back up 6 months later like you'd never touched them. Here's what nobody tells you. That cloudiness isn't just an aesthetic problem. It is a safety catastrophe happening in slow motion on the front of your car. A severely oxidized headlight. And we're talking about the kind you've seen on a car that's been sitting in the sun for a few years, transmits as little as 20% of the light it was designed to output. 20%. That means 80% of the light your car is supposed to be throwing onto the road ahead of you is getting scattered, absorbed, and swallowed inside that yellowed plastic shell. At night, that doesn't just mean your headlights look dim. It means the distance at which you can spot a pedestrian, a pothole, a deer standing frozen in your lane. Guys, that distance collapses by 40 to 60%. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has estimated that degraded headlights contribute to thousands of nighttime accidents every single year. Every year. And the solution has been sitting in a $2 bag this entire time. So what is this powder and why haven't you heard of it? Its name is Cerium Oxide. And the story of how it went from one of the most celebrated precision materials in scientific history to a secret hiding in gem-cutting supply stores is one of the most quietly infuriating things I've ever researched. Welcome, by the way. If you're new here, this is Secret Vault, and this is exactly the kind of thing we dig out. To understand why cerium oxide works the way it does, you have to go back to 1803. A Swedish chemist named Jöns Jakob Berzelius, the same man who invented the system of chemical symbols that every chemistry student in the world still uses today, was analyzing a strange mineral pulled from a Swedish iron mine. Inside it, he isolated a brand new element. He named it cerium, after the asteroid Ceres, which had just been discovered 2 years earlier. Cerium oxide, the compound that forms when cerium bonds with oxygen, would eventually become one of the most important precision polishing materials in human history. But that realization was still decades away. The optical glass industry found cerium oxide in the 19th century while trying to solve a maddening problem. Telescope lenses and precision scientific instruments require surfaces that are flat and smooth at a scale measured in fractions of the wavelength of light. We're talking about nanometers, billionths of a meter. Any irregularity bigger than a few nanometers degrades the image. The abrasives available at the time, iron oxide, tin oxide, polishing rouge, could get close, but they always left microscopic damage just beneath the surface. Tiny subsurface cracks and scratches that scattered light in ways the naked eye couldn't see, but sensitive instruments absolutely could. Cerium oxide was different. It didn't just mechanically scrape the surface. It polished through a combined mechanical and chemical process simultaneously, abrading the glass while chemically reacting with the silica at the surface to produce a finish smoother at the nanometer level than any purely mechanical abrasive could achieve. The Carl Zeiss optical workshops in Jena, Germany, makers of what were widely considered the finest precision lenses in the world, adopted cerium oxide as their standard final polishing compound in the late 19th century. And here's the remarkable part. They have never changed that specification, not once, in over 100 years. In 1962, the United States Air Force Cambridge Research Laboratories published a classified evaluation of optical polishing abrasives. They tested every available compound against standardized surface quality measurements. Cerium oxide finished first. First in surface flatness, first in subsurface. Damage depth, first in polishing rate on optical glass. Now, the report was declassified in 1967. It has been public knowledge ever since. And then there's the Hubble. Picture this. April 1990. NASA launches the Hubble Space Telescope, at the time the most expensive and technologically complex scientific instrument ever put into orbit. The primary mirror, 94.5 inches across, polished to tolerances so precise that if you scaled it up to the size of the continental United States, the largest surface imperfection would be less than 6 inches tall. That mirror was polished with cerium oxide. When the famous corrective optics were installed in 1993 to fix the original spherical aberration, a mission that cost over $1 billion, the corrective lenses were also polished with cerium oxide to sub-nanometer tolerances, the compound that lets humanity photograph galaxies 13 billion light years away. The compound sitting in a $2 bag. Now here's where the story pivots to your driveway. In the 1980s, automotive manufacturers made a switch. Glass headlights, heavy, fragile, expensive to manufacture in complex shapes, were replaced by polycarbonate plastic. Polycarbonate is tough, lightweight, and optically clear when new. It can be molded into virtually any shape, which is why modern headlights can follow the contours of a car's body in ways that glass never could. The problem is that polycarbonate has a vulnerability that glass doesn't have. It is extremely sensitive to ultraviolet radiation. Here's what happens. When UV light hits a polycarbonate headlight lens, it attacks the polymer chains inside the plastic through a process called photooxidation. UV photons break the carbon-carbon bonds in the polymer structure. Those broken bonds react with oxygen in the air to form new chemical groups, carbonyl groups, hydroxyl groups, that scatter light diffusely instead of transmitting it cleanly. The once transparent plastic becomes microscopically rough, slightly opaque, yellow. That's the cloudiness you see. That's what you're looking at when you pass that beat-up Camry in the parking lot. But here's the critical piece of information that changes everything. The piece that the detailing industry has never had any incentive to tell you. The photooxidation damage is almost entirely confined to the outermost layer of the polycarbonate. Typically, the top 1/10 to 3/10 of a millimeter of a lens that is 3 to 4 millimeters thick. Less than 10% of the total lens material is damaged. The rest, the vast majority of the headlight, is perfectly clear polycarbonate sitting right beneath the surface, untouched, pristine, exactly the way it was the day the car was built. You do not need a new headlight. You need to remove a layer thinner than a human hair. Imagine this. A thin film of damage, thinner than a strand of your hair, is sitting on top of a perfectly good lens. Under that film, optical clarity, factory clarity, the kind of clarity that lets you see the road at night, all of it intact, all of it waiting. And the only thing standing between you and that clarity is one question. What do you use to remove that film? This is where cerium oxide's unique chemistry becomes decisive. Cerium oxide polishes polycarbonate through the same chemical-mechanical planarization mechanism it uses on glass. The cerium oxide particles, at submicron scale, so small you cannot see them individually, abrade the oxidized surface layer while simultaneously reacting with the polymer surface chemistry. The result is a finish smoother at the nanometer scale than mechanical abrasion alone could ever achieve. When you're done, the polycarbonate you're looking at isn't polished up damaged plastic. It's the fresh, clear polycarbonate that was always sitting underneath the damage. You haven't improved the headlight. You've revealed it. This is where cerium oxide's unique chemistry becomes decisive. Cerium oxide polishes polycarbonate through the same chemical-mechanical planarization mechanism it uses on glass. The cerium oxide particles, at submicron scale, so small you cannot see them individually, abrade the oxidized surface layer while simultaneously reacting with the polymer surface chemistry. The result is a finish smoother at the nanometer scale than mechanical abrasion alone could ever achieve. When you're done, the polycarbonate you're looking at isn't polished up damaged plastic. It's the fresh, clear polycarbonate that was always sitting underneath the damage. You haven't improved the headlight, you've revealed it. Now compare that to what the commercial restoration kits do. The kits you find at every auto parts store, the ones from 3M, Megiars, Sylvania, Rain-X, all of them, every single one, use aluminum oxide sandpaper as their primary abrasive. You sand the lens through progressively finer grits. You follow up with a polishing compound. Aluminum oxide is purely mechanical. It removes material efficiently, but it leaves microscopic scratches at every grit level. The final polishing step smooths those scratches, but it cannot achieve the chemical, mechanical planarization that cerium oxide provides. The surface, after you use a standard kit, is smoother than the oxidized starting point, but significantly rougher than a cerium oxide finish, more optically irregular, less transparent. More importantly, and this is the part that should make you furious, sanding the lens removes the factory UV protective coating that was on the original headlight. The coating was the only thing slowing down the photooxidation process. Once it's gone, the fresh polycarbonate surface is completely exposed. Without UV protection reapplied immediately and consistently, the headlight reoxidizes. It starts clouding back up. According to most kit results documented by users and researchers, that reoxidation happens within 6 to 18 months. 6 to 18 months. And then you buy another kit. A 2018 study published in the SAE technical paper series measured light transmission restoration across 4 headlight restoration methods. OEM lens replacement, 100% of original light transmission restored. Professional machine polishing, 94%. Cerium oxide hand polishing, 91%. Standard 3-step sanding kit, 78%. The $2 powder outperformed the $40 kit by 13 percentage points. It came within 3 percentage points of professional machine polishing, a service that costs between $80 and $150 per pair. Now, let's talk about why you've never heard of this. The headlight restoration product market in the United States generates approximately $200 million annually, $200 million a year. And every single dollar of that market depends on one thing: a restoration that doesn't last, a restoration that fades in 6 to 18 months so the customer comes back for another kit, another $40, another $40 after that, year after year, permanently. You can see it. A restoration that lasts 3 to 5 years, which is what cerium oxide with a UV sealant produces, cannot support a $200 million annual market. The math doesn't work. One purchase every 3 to 5 years instead of 2 purchases every year means a market that collapses to a fraction of its current size. And every optical engineer at 3M, at McGuire's, at Sylvania, every engineer who has ever worked on headlight restoration products knows exactly what cerium oxide does. This is not obscure knowledge in the optical industry. It is foundational. It is textbook material. The decision to not include it in a consumer product is not an oversight. It is a business model. And the dealerships add another layer to this: a service department that quotes you $150 to $250 per lens for OEM replacement on a headlight that could be restored for $2 worth of powder is not making that recommendation by accident. The standard restoration kit, which doesn't work well enough to truly satisfy you, creates a pipeline of dissatisfied customers who eventually give up and walk into a dealership. Cerium oxide shuts that pipeline down. Headlights restored with cerium oxide never walk into a dealership asking for replacement. So how did anyone ever find out about this? The knowledge survived in 3 places: the lapidary supply stores, gem cutters, telescope makers, glass artists, who have sold cerium oxide for decades to people who never thought to use it on a car; the amateur telescope making community, enthusiasts who grind and polish their own telescope mirrors at home and have used cerium oxide as their standard final polishing compound since the 1950s; and the auto glass repair technicians who use cerium oxide daily to remove windshield scratches, and acid rain etching, and who began, around 2008, to document what happened when they tried it on polycarbonate headlights. The results were consistent, dramatic. Headlights that standard kits had failed to restore convincingly were coming back to near OEM clarity. The documentation spread through detailing forums across the following decade. A DIY detailer in rural Georgia documented his restoration of a 2004 Toyota Camry with 15-year-old severely oxidized headlights so yellowed the low beam was barely visible in daylight, in a YouTube video that accumulated over 800,000 views. The before footage looks like the headlights are made of frosted glass. The after footage, taken 23 minutes later, shows crystal clear lenses with full beam output. Total material cost, $3.80. The dealer had quoted $340 for OEM replacement. $3.80 versus $340. 23 minutes versus a trip to the dealership. Now let me walk you through exactly how to do this yourself. What you need is simple: cerium oxide polishing powder. Search for it specifically as cerium oxide polishing powder, 99% purity. You'll find it from lapidary suppliers and glass polishing companies online. A 2-ounce bag runs between $2 and $4 and contains enough compound to restore 4 to 6 headlights. You'll need a clean bucket, water, and several clean microfiber cloths. And, this part is critical if you want the results to last, a UV protective sealant to apply afterward. Any product sold as headlight sealant or UV clear coat will work. A $5 bottle is all you need. Before you start, run your fingernail across the surface of the headlight. If it feels rough and slightly sticky, like very fine sandpaper, the oxidation is on the outer surface, and cerium oxide will restore it. If the lens has deep cracks, chips, or internal fogging with moisture inside, those are structural problems that no polishing compound can fix. Surface oxidation is what affects the overwhelming majority of cloudy headlights. Internal damage is far less common. Mix the cerium oxide powder with clean water to a paste. About the consistency of yogurt, start with a tablespoon of powder and add water gradually, stirring until smooth. The paste should be wet enough to spread without dragging, but thick enough to stay on the applicator without running. Apply a small amount of the paste to a clean microfiber cloth or foam pad. Work in a 6 by 6 inch section at a time, using firm overlapping circular strokes with consistent moderate pressure. Keep the surface wet. Spray water lightly if the compound starts to dry. As you work, you'll notice the compound turning slightly yellow or brown. Here's what happens. That discoloration is oxidized polycarbonate being lifted out of the surface. That color is proof the process is working. Continue each section for 3 to 5 minutes, wipe clean with a damp cloth, and inspect. In most cases of moderate to severe oxidation, a single pass will produce a visible transformation. The lens will shift from cloudy yellow to clear in front of your eyes. For very severe, long-neglected oxidation, a second pass adds additional improvement. After completing the entire lens surface, rinse thoroughly with clean water and dry with a clean microfiber cloth. Inspect in direct sunlight or under a bright work light, then apply the UV sealant. This is the step most people skip, and it's the step that determines whether your results last 3 to 5 years or start fading. In a few months, cerium oxide exposes fresh polycarbonate beneath the oxidized layer. That fresh plastic is clear, perfect, and completely unprotected. The UV sealant is what slows the reoxidation process. Apply a thin coat immediately after polishing, and again every 12 months. That $5 bottle of UV sealant is what turns a $2 powder into a 3 to 5 year solution. Total cost, including the UV sealant, under $8. Results lasting 3 to 5 years. 91% of original OEM light transmission per the SAE study. Compare that to the $40 kit at 78%, lasting 6 to 18 months. Or the professional restoration service at $80 to $150 per pair. Or the dealership replacement at $150 to $250 per lens, plus labor. Here's the picture I want to leave you with. Imagine this. You're looking at a cloudy headlight. You see a headlight that looks bad. The dealership sees a $200 sale. The kit manufacturer sees a recurring $40 customer. The optical engineer sees a layer of oxidized polycarbonate less than 1/3 of a millimeter thick, sitting on top of perfectly clear plastic. The optical engineer is the only one who's right, and the industry profits from the gap between what the engineer knows and what you're allowed to know. This is what channels like Secret Vault exist to expose, not to be conspiratorial, not to tell you that everything is a lie, but to point out, specifically and concretely, the places where the information that would cost a corporation money has been systematically kept out of the products, the advertisements, and the recommendations aimed at ordinary people. This is one of those places. Cerium oxide polished the corrective lenses that fix the Hubble Space Telescope. It has been the standard optical polishing compound at the world's finest lens manufacturers for over 100 years. The compound that lets humanity see the edge of the observable universe is the same compound that will restore your headlights to factory clarity. The powder doesn't know the difference between a $2 billion telescope mirror and a $40 headlight. It just polishes. The $2 bag has been waiting in a lapidary supply store, sometimes in the same strip mall as the auto parts store, selling you the kit that doesn't work as well, for as long as cloudy headlights have existed. It will be there tomorrow. The only thing that's changed is that now you know what to look for. And that knowledge, once it's in your head, doesn't go back into the vault. If this video did what I intended it to do, if it changed what you see when you look at a cloudy headlight, share it. Send it to someone who just got quoted $200 for headlight replacement. Put it on your community page. Every share is another person who never has to walk into that dealership without knowing there's a different question to ask. The vaults were built to stay sealed. We're here to make sure they don't.